This week, we're talking about conflict in relationships. And by way of reminder, this is the last week of the class. What a whirlwind tour. By the end of the week, you should upload the link to your group presentation, and it would be best, I would prefer if each individual group member would upload that link to their individual Dropbox, as well as your own written analysis in a separate Dropbox of your group experience. More details on these two assignments are in those drop boxes themselves, or they're in the green sheet, or you can email me if you have any questions. So, conflict. Who here has experienced conflict in a relationship? Just raise your hands. Anyone? Anyone? A few of you. Your textbook, I think it's very funny. It says, sometimes in our relationships, we find ourselves in conflict with others over core issues. Sometimes. As I think I've said before this semester, there are some people that say that conflict is the main reason that we communicate at all. We have conflict, and communication has arisen so that we can explore our differences. If we all thought the same, believed the same thing, did the same things, there'd be no point in communicating. It's important to remember that there is a continuum of conflict, from mild pseudo-conflict to conflicts over facts to conflict over your fundamental beliefs about life and the universe. My favorite is ego conflict, and I have to think that that is what I have seen most in the workplace. Maybe that's because I work at a university. It can be the most inconsequential situation, but a person says, I am not going to budge an inch because I got to show you that I am right and you are wrong, and we can't both be winners in that. It's win-lose, and that's a bad way to approach conflict. As we learned before, conflict is not inherently bad. Sometimes conflict can be that element that disturbs equilibrium and pushes the group forward on its merry way. In my experience in both the groups in graduate school and work-related groups, the most common types of conflict are affective and inequity conflicts. In affective conflict, people focus on personalities, and then unfortunately that colors everything that they do. They make negative assumptions about people, and then even when people try to do something positive, we only see it in a negative light because we simply don't like them or because we feel that they have offended us. Inequity conflicts can be very difficult to deal with. The idea that I'm contributing more than everyone else, or that someone else isn't doing their fair share or pulling their own weight, I found it's very difficult to argue with people who are convinced that they are doing all the work. I do encourage you to complete the organizational conflict inventory on pages 209 and 210 of Myers and Anderson to see what your style of dealing with conflict is. How do you manage conflict? I'd like to see the number of books that published on this topic every year. And why do you suppose that is? It's because there's always conflict in the workplace. And there are always many, many different ways to deal with it. Hopefully, as you review the ways that we respond to conflict, you're able to identify how you tend to respond. Are you an accommodator, a collaborator? Theoretically, it's great if we collaborate those that we have with those that we have conflict with, but in reality, none of the strategies is inherently bad or good. Sometimes, even if things are really hot and contentious, withdrawal is the best response, even though withdrawal is usually not a great way to resolve conflict. Used too much, it can be destructive, but sometimes you use it and it's the best thing to do. Accommodating can be a great thing if you don't really have a stake in the issue, but if you use too often, then the other person will grow into a dominating position and think they have the run of the place. So collaboration is usually the highest strategy for dealing with conflict. In collaboration, everyone works together. They communicate openly, they communicate freely, they find a joint solution to the problems they face together. And how often does that happen in the workplace? When it does, it's a great thing. About negative or destructive communication patterns, this is a section that you should review. Ascribing motives, counterblame, demand withdrawal, stubbornness. This isn't a comprehensive list, of course, but these patterns can certainly impede effective conflict management. Ascribing motives is really a big one. Seems like we see it every day. We assume that we totally know we assume that we completely understand what other people are thinking or feeling, and this applies to both patrons and coworkers. Like so many things, it's very easy to see the negative patterns in other people, and just a little bit more difficult to see them in ourselves. Remember that there's a difference between people's behavior and who they are. When we do something wrong, it's an isolated incident. But we're still fundamentally good people. But when we tend to see others' missteps as evidence that they are fundamentally bad, or lazy, or disagreeable, or cranky, or whatever, without cutting them the same slack that we would cut for ourselves. I've been reading a book called Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me. I'm actually thinking of using it, part of that anyway, as a text for this class. We'll see. You might pick it up. It's very interesting. Finally, when someone comes at you with conflict, whether it's outright criticism or they just do or say something that creates a hostile environment, the most important thing, and unfortunately, yes, it's the most difficult thing, is to not respond with defensiveness or anger. You show your gratitude for the feedback and tell them you'll see what you can do. And if you can, thank them. Yep. In the last chapter of Myers and Anderson, we see the difference between supportive and defensive communication patterns, or climates. You have probably been involved in both kinds of climates. The descriptions of how communication climate is established is on page 223, and it's very important. You got to be open, got to be honest, and we should describe rather than evaluate. Nothing will turn off fellow group members faster than criticizing them. When we do these things, we can experience greater communication, satisfaction, and better overall group cohesion together. So that's about it, my friends. Have a great week. Coming towards the end. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.